Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to the channel and welcome as always to our coffee times. Today I am here to bring you some movie recommendation, and these are all movies that are thriller slash horror films that are based in hotels.
It's coffee time.
So just the other day, I watched a movie that was on my watch list of movies that I wanted to check out, and sadly, it was a bad movie. So we're not including it in this list, but it actually inspired this video, and that was Night Clerk. I was excited by the premise, I was excited by the cast, but it just fell flat. And I thought, you know, there are some movies that are kind of decent, other ones that are really good, that are classics that everybody knows about, that are based in hotels. There are also a lot of movies based on hotels that are more like B movies that nobody has ever heard of. And I have not checked all of those out myself. So in this list you will find some classics and you will find some that maybe you didn't know about. I have a total of 15 and I'm going to give you the movies in chronological order. So we'll start by the oldest and end up on the newest that I have included on the list. Before we jump to that list, and of course all the things that I'm going to tell you about the movies are going to be spoiler free. If you're new here and this is the first time that you're seeing this video and you're joining my coffee times, please consider subscribing to the channel, especially if you love horror, and also hit the notification bell before you leave. Let's start with the big classic that I am sure everybody has heard of, and it is also one of the most famous movies by this director, and that is of course Psycho from 1960, an American psychological horror thriller film produced and directed by Alfred Hitchcock. Marianne disappears after stealing money from her employer, and so her lover and her sister are looking for her, and they end up in the Bates Motel where they get to meet Norman Bates. So this is a extreme classic that I watched back in the day in VHS in black and white, and I've always loved it for the simplicity yet the creepiness of the film, and I've always loved it. It's one of those movies, of course, that once you know the twist then it's not the same, but if you have missed this classic you have to give it a try. Now we're jumping straight to the 80s, and I have here a horror comedy that always has had a soft spot in my heart, and that is Motel Hell from 1980, an American comedy horror film following Vincent Smith and his sister Ida that run a rural hotel, and they earn most of their money by selling these fantastic sausages that everybody in town loves, until they make a gruesome discovery, which is basically that the patrons from this hotel end up being victims of these siblings, and they end up being killed and chopped to make the beautiful sausages. So this movie is very, how to describe this? It's very cheesy, corny horror, a little bit cartoony at times, so you have to be somebody that loves that kind of style. But I really enjoyed the combo between the silliness, like the fun parts of the film, and how disgusting and gruesome the main plot is. And of course this would not be a proper video about horror movies in hotels if I would not mention what is probably the most well-known hotel in the horror community. That's right, the Overlook Hotel. We're here to talk now about The Shining from 1980. A psychological horror film produced and directed by Stanley Kubrick. The film is based on Stephen King's 1977 novel of the same name. We follow Jack Torrance, who is an aspiring writer that is recovering from his problem with alcoholism, and he gets offered this job in the winter to take care of the Overlook Hotel, and he thinks this is going to be the perfect time for him to just, you know, have some time apart to concentrate and write a great book. And he moves there with his son and wife, And they start to make really gruesome discoveries about things that have happened in the Overlook Hotel in the past. The son, Danny Torrance, has what is called the Shining, which is basically that he has this connection with the other world and he's able to see things of that gruesome past from the hotel. At some point, Jack is kind of having a little bit of cabin fever and he starts losing his head just a little smidgen and things get a little bit out of control. Now, this classic is one of the most loved horror movies, or one of the most popular ones, and even though it is completely different from the book, I still was able to really love and enjoy the film as a separate thing a little bit from the book, because if you read the book and watch the movie, they are really complete different things. So I understand why Stephen King wasn't a fan of the movie to begin with. I think he's made peace with it right now. But you know, this movie, from the cinematography, the acting, everything, it's just a masterpiece. We're going now to one that it's not gonna be for everybody, but I absolutely love movies that have to do with dolls. I know most of the time they are more funny than horrifying, but we're here to talk about a movie that started a franchise that it is really well loved in the horror community, and that is Puppet Master from 1989, an American horror film that follows a group of physics that go to the Bodega Bay Inn. They discover there that apparently their colleague Neil has committed suicide, and they all start to have really weird nightmares. And of course, at some point, they're being attacked by these puppets created by these puppeteer. And you know, this movie might not be for everybody if you don't specifically love movies that have to do, you know, with dolls or puppets of any kind. But I've always loved it, and I think it deserves a little bit more love. Now it has a fan base, so if you never started this franchise, maybe you would like to give it a try. We're jumping straight now to the early 2000s, where we have a mystery slash thriller that I always thought that it was very genius and I've always really loved, and that is Identity from 2003. An American psychological mystery slasher film directed by James Mangold, loosely based from the story structure of Agatha Christie's 1939 whodunit and Then They Were None. We are following a group of strangers that have been isolated due to weather conditions and find themselves trapped in a hotel where one by one they are going to be mysteriously killed. Slowly, the movie starts to reveal events that happened before our, you know, group of strangers got to the hotel, and it has a lot of good editing. I mean, one of my favorite things about this film is the structure, how this movie was put together and how slowly things were revealed, how the twist came around. I just think they did such an amazing job to tell this story. Also, the cast was fantastic and you really get immersed in solving the mystery of this hotel, of these people, and if you have not checked it out by now, I think that you would really enjoy it. Now we're moving to a hidden gem that I don't know if many people really know about it. This is a very independent movie that came out in 2004, and that is Hotel, an Austrian horror drama film directed by Jessica Hausner. This is a movie about a woman that starts a new job at a hotel in the Alps, really deep in the Alps, and when she takes a position, she didn't know that the girl she's actually replacing disappeared. Nobody knows what happened to her, and nobody even opened an investigation. This movie might not be for everybody, also because it is a movie that is very slow, it is very minimalistic, and there is not too many things that happen in this film. It's not too eventful, and that might be frustrating for a lot of viewers. However, I really enjoyed this movie because of the story that it was telling. It's slow paced, like I said, not too much happened, it's kept really minimalistic, but I did enjoy it, and it is one of those movies that I know not many people know of because it's a small Austrian film. So if you have access to it, I would recommend you to give it a watch. I did want to mention though, for this movie, even though it's kept kind of minimal, you know, it can be said it's maybe too basic for a lot of people, it does a great job to keep tension and to keep the viewer in this feeling of dread. So yeah, if you don't mind movies that are a little bit more kind of slow-paced and minimalistic, give it a try. The next movie is a movie that if you love the style and the art of Rob Zombie, you might enjoy, because we're gonna talk about The Devil's Reject from 2005, an American black comedy horror film written, produced and directed by Rob Zombie. It is the second film in the Firefly film series and a direct sequel to House of 1000 Corpses. This is not a spoiler, but the movie follows the family from House of 1000 Corpses, and basically the police decides to kind of raid the house and capture the Firefly family, but a couple of them manage to escape and then they lock themselves in an abandoned hotel, so that's why I chose this one for this list. And you know, there is not way too much that I can tell you about this film. I guess you know what to expect, especially if you watch the first part. And if you love the style of House of 1000 Corpses, you will enjoy this one. Now, for me, Rob Zombie movies are either a hit or a miss, but I really did enjoy a House of 1000 Corpses as well as The Devil's Reject. Moving on with our list, we have Vacancy from 2007. This is an American slasher film that follows a couple whose car breaks down, so they have no choice but to spend the night at a remote hotel. The couple starts to watch in the television what they think are low-budget slasher horror movies, and at some point they realize that actually those movies were filmed in that hotel and that there's cameras in the rooms, and they have to kind of fight for their lives if they don't want to become the next victims for the next movie. So this is something that will make you not want to sleep at remote hotels for the rest of your life and it's gonna scar you. But this is one that not a lot of people talk about, but I think that it deserves a chance. I know this film has some sequels, but I've never watched them. I don't know what to expect from them, and I have the impression they're not gonna be great, but if you watch the sequel, let me know down below if it's any good. The next one is a horror thriller, also adapted from the works of the one and only Stephen King, and that is 1408 from 2007, an American psychological horror film based on Stephen King's 1999 short story of the same name. We follow here Mike, who is an author that investigates haunted houses, and he ends up in this hotel. Now, he is skeptical when it comes to the paranormal, but while he's in the room, he experiences bizarre things and he sees things happen, and he starts to change his mind very quickly. I absolutely love this film. I thought that, you know, the actors in this film were so strong. The acting was great. They kept this movie so eerie, so kind of spooky, and this is one of my favorite Stephen King adaptations for sure. Now, not only did this movie had good acting, and not only was this a story about a haunted place, but also deals with grief and with the horrors of the real world, and I also love the pacing of the film. The next one is not the best movie you're ever gonna see, but this mystery thriller had very interesting aesthetic going on for it, and I wanted to mention it here, and that is Across the Hall from 2009. An American neo-noir thriller film directed by Alex Merkin. We follow Julian, and he receives a call from his best friend, and he tells him that apparently the fiance is cheating on him. So Julian decides to follow his fiance, played by Brittany Murphy, that I've always loved, rest in peace, and he decides to follow her to a hotel to see what's up, to see what she's hiding, and of course that's when trouble starts. I just love the style in general of this film, the way that it looked, and it also has strong main characters. However, the plot can get a little bit messy, so it's not really the best of this list, but I just wanted to mention it because it might be one that you haven't heard of yet. Now, our next movie is also one that might be a hit or miss for a lot of people, but I do have the feeling that it has a selective fan base, and that is The Innkeepers from 2011, an American supernatural horror film that follows the last two employees of a century-old haunted hotel that go on the hunt for ghosts. So this is the last week that these two people are working in the hotel in this inn, and they are, you know, convinced that this place is haunted, that there are ghosts, so they decide to do an investigation and try to capture these ghosts, and that is basically it. That is the plot of the film. Now, even though this movie is not bringing anything new to the genre, I thought it was decent. I thought it did manage to capture that kind of eeriness, spookiness that a ghost story requires, and I also thought the acting was fairly decent. So if you have not checked this one out yet, you might give it a go. Like I said, I think this is a movie that either you enjoy or you just hated, so I don't know where you guys will fall in this case, but in case you have not checked it out and you're looking for a ghost story in a inn, this might be for you. Our next movie is also another sequel. I feel like I have a couple on this list, and that is The Collection from 2012, an American horror film and a direct sequel to the 2009 film The Collector. The daughter of a really wealthy man is kidnapped by the known serial killer as The Collector. So he hires a group of mercenaries to go and rescue her, and The Collector is keeping her in his kind of palace of torture and pain, which is an abandoned hotel. Now, this sequel is not really the strongest. I think that is most of the case with this type of sequels, and this movie might have a little bit of gratuitous torture and blood, but if you love your movie, you know, bloody and gory, and you don't care so much about a good nice plot, this might be one for you. The next one is a movie that I really wanted to watch, and when I watched it, I could not decide if I really loved it or if I was really disappointed, and to this day I'm still kind of having mixed feelings about it, and that is Hotel Artemis from 2018, an American dystopian tech noir thriller film written and directed by Drew Pearce in his feature film directorial debut. We are in Los Angeles in 2028. There is a lot of riots on the street, and there is this 13-story hotel called Hotel Artemis, where basically they're giving care to specific criminals and people that have a membership, and there is a nurse inside and everything to take care of them. So we follow a bunch of really charismatic and different characters that find themselves at the same night at this hotel, where the nurse, played by Jodie Foster, that did such an amazing job, is trying to keep this hotel basically afloat. I just had the feeling that this movie was a little bit half-baked at times, but I absolutely love the concept. I absolutely love the little world building that we got in this film. I just feel like they didn't use its full potential, and there's a lot that I am missing when it comes to the story. The next one is another movie about a hotel that I was also super excited to check out, and actually, even though this has a long running time, I had a lot of fun with this one, and that is Bad Times at the El Royale from 2018, an American neo-noir thriller film written, produced and directed by Drew Goddard, that follows a group of strangers that find themselves checking into this hotel in 1969, and they're all shady. They all have secrets, they all have things that they're trying to bury deep in that hotel so that nobody finds out, and slowly all of their background stories, their secrets are being revealed, and you get a couple of really nice twists, and you get to see Chris Hemsworth in this fantastic role of a cult leader, and I just loved it. I just thought it was great. It was entertaining, it was fun at moments, and I just really enjoyed it. It was like one of those refreshing and interesting takes on the whodunit story, and I had a great time. And the last movie that we have in this list is also a movie that came out in 2018, and that is Piercing, an American horror thriller film that follows Reed, that kisses his wife and baby goodbye for a seemingly normal business trip, and then checks himself into a hotel room to accomplish something he's always dreamed of. He wants to do the perfect murder. But of course things are not gonna go the way that he has planned, and I think one of the strongest part about this movie is the chemistry of the main characters and the good acting. It's also a movie that has a beautiful style and beautiful cinematography. It's really stylish, aesthetically pleasing, and it gives you kind of a 70s vibe. But I have to say about this movie that a lot of people might not be happy with the ending. It's something that tends to be a little bit disappointing for some viewers, so if you have not checked it out, I still do recommend you to give it a go though. Now you guys might be wondering why I finished my list of 15 movies and there is obviously one that I have not mentioned that is really well known, and it's not that I have forgotten about it, but I consciously made the decision not to watch this film, and that is Hostel. I haven't watched the first one, second, third, I don't know how many there are at this point. And the only reason being is, I have the feeling, correct me if I'm wrong, I have the feeling that this movie is just basically there for the torture, for just gratuitous torture, sadistic torture for not too much of a purpose. And I don't enjoy those movies. Like for me, even though I enjoy my gore and I enjoy my slashers and I enjoy sometimes a little bit of torture depending on the film, I like to have a nice story. I like to have some twists and turns. I like to have character arc, you know, some character development, something that it's giving me, you know, more satisfaction than just watch people sit there and be tortured. And I have the feeling these movies were made just to please people that love exactly that, love to see strangers getting tortured. And if that is your jam, perfectly fine. But I have never watched this film because I have the feeling that is exactly what this movie is about, and that is just not my jam. I have felt the pressure sometimes of the horror community, you know, like, oh, you never watch Hostel, like, you know, you have to because you love horror. You don't have to watch all the movies just because you love the genre. Just because you love horror doesn't mean you're gonna love all horror subgenres or all types of horror. And it is completely fine if there are certain types of movies that you don't want to watch because you know that they're not gonna be for you. So anyways, all I wanted to tell you guys is I have not forgotten about Hostel. I just have never watched the movie, so I have not included it in this list. Alright you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this list of 15 movies that are based or take place, part of it, in a hotel, in an inn, any place like that. So I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know down below if there is any other ones that I have missed that you would recommend me. Let's talk about it in the comments. Thanks so much for watching you guys. Please give the video a big thumbs up for support. If you want to follow me on other social media, as always the links are down below. And I hope to see you all in the next coffee time. Bye!